I have spent the last several days evaluating this TV, trying to poke holes in its performance, and I found a few that I'll be telling you about, but in the end, I think you're going to like what I have to say about the TCL QM8. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and today I'm going to try to tell you everything you need to know about the TCL QM8 Mini LED Backlit 4K HDR TV. Now, if you haven't seen my unboxing and setup video, feel free to check that out later, if for no other reason than to laugh at me making an idiotic, totally avoidable, and almost catastrophic mistake. But the takeaways from that video relevant to this review are that I was not in love with the plastic portion of the pedestal stand, nor do I feel like the little plastic cover panels on the back of the TV are of especially high quality. But ultimately, the stand is doing its job just fine. And honestly, I'm too busy being in love with the fact that it is a pedestal style stand now as opposed to feet, since I think it gives the TV a better look and it'll fit on a wider variety of media stands. Otherwise, I think the TV's design is just fine, thank you very much. Google TV is running like a dream on this TV, I'm happy to report. No laggy operation or crashing apps. And the user menu has been a pleasure to work with as I've tested various settings and dialed this TV in. One other important note, in the unboxing I indicated that the HDR brightness setting was not maxed out as I expected it to be. That's usually what a TV does when it goes into HDR mode. Turns out that's because the intelligent picture adaptive brightness setting that you see here was turned on by default, which I was not expecting, probably because I turned off the eco mode. And it's more common in a movie picture preset, like the one I used here, for that to be off by default. Anyway, I think the adaptive brightness feature on this set works pretty well, so you can leave it on if you like, but if you want full manual control of the TV, definitely turn it off. Also, there's a micro contrast setting on this TV under Advanced Settings, then Brightness Settings. If you get this TV, you can try toggling it on and off and see what you think. But personally, I think it gives this overly contrasty picture that it's just not as good as if you leave it off. Now, I want to address the fact that I have an 85-inch QM8 here. Don't get me wrong, it's been a thrill to evaluate a TV of this size. My only regret is that if I used this unit in comparisons on this channel, it's going to dwarf the competing TVs, which are all 65-inch models. Might have to ask TCL to send a 65-inch just for that purpose. Anyway, and this is important, for the most part, you can expect the other QM8 sizes, 65, 75, the 85 here, and even the massive 98-inch versions to perform very similarly. Each model has the number of mini LED backlights and zones it needs to achieve similar performance across the available screen sizes. The biggest difference you'd experience as you move up in screen size will be in how much this TV lights up your room, because the more screen area you have pumping out light, the more light is going to be coming at you. It's the same as if you had like 8 60-watt light bulbs, then stepped up to 12 bulbs, then to 18, and so on. Each bulb is putting out the same amount of light, but the more bulbs you have, the more lit up the room gets, right? Now, that's going to be relevant here because this is one of the brightest TVs you can buy right now. Speaking of brightness, when you hear reviewers like me talking about peak brightness as if it's the holy grail of TV performance benchmarks, first of all, it isn't necessarily, but the reason we do like to talk about peak brightness, as I will shortly, is because when watching HDR content, we want those HDR highlights to really gleam and sparkle, right? So having high brightness capabilities can help with that. But also, if you watch TV in a fairly bright room, a brighter TV with a higher average picture level, or APL as we say, can still look vivid, even with lots of ambient light around. Most of the time. That's a foreshadowing too. Lots of foreshadowing going on here. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's dive into the measurements real quick in a segment we like to call Numbers for Knit Nerds. By the way, sounds like you guys are into some Knit Nerds merch, which warms my heart. You have no idea. So I'm gonna make that happen. Leave a like for that. Also, as always, if you're not a measurements and metrics person, feel free to skip this section. Time-coded links are down in the description. So I'm glad I measured this TV again rather than just relying on the measurements I got when I tested this model at TCL's event in New York, because I did learn some new things and it does behave a little differently than that TV did. Here's the deal. I selected movie mode and touched nothing to see what customers will get if they buy this TV, and just pick the movie mode, which I highly recommend you do if you get this TV. In SDR, with the brightness setting at about 33, so 1/3 of its capacity, brightness averaged just over 800 nits. That, my friends, is some seriously juiced up SDR brightness. If you're a purist, you're gonna wanna turn this TV's brightness setting down. Now, that sounds crazy considering it starts at 33 out of 100 and can go even brighter. But if you're in a dark room, the default SDR movie setting could be a bit bright for you. Now, the grayscale, again, without calibration, was a bit heavy on the red and the blue. The average delta E was around 6, which is technically within visible error territory for the well-trained eye, but not bad. And I can tell you that uncalibrated, this TV never, ever looked like way out. And that goes for color too, which had an average delta E of about 5.5 in SDR and HDR. But that's because of a couple of bad Apple colors. Most of the colors were very accurate, which explains why I saw no red flags. This is nuts, folks. In HDR, I got some insane readings. Now, before I rattle off these numbers, I have an important disclaimer for you. I currently use a Spectracal C6 profile to an X-Rite i1 Pro 2. That C6 colorimeter is only rated to read up to 2000 nits accurately. However, I have seen it reading 2500 nits and have good reason to trust it, as I've tested it against some more expensive meters in the past. Anything above 2500? Well, I can't trust it for calibration, but look, I'll just come right out and say it. I got readings of up to 3500 nits. Now, that reading came from Calman's peak versus window size test. And maybe something funky was happening there, but I ran it multiple times, and here, look for yourself. That's what I got. Now, when I switched to the peak luminance stability test you see here, which I can set to be any size window I want, it routinely sat right at 2500 nits. Look, all I'm saying is that this TV is more powerful than I can even measure right now. I'm sure we'll see some interesting readings from other reviewers with much more expensive meters than I currently have. That's changing soon, by the way. But I think we can safely say this TV is extremely powerful. And we'll talk about how it handles that power in just a moment. The QM8 covers 97% of DCI-P3 and about 76% of BT 2020 according to my readings, and the HDR color accuracy, again, averaged a delta E of just shy of 6 without calibration. So, technically not super accurate, but not way off either. Most importantly, a professional calibrator should be able to get this TV super dialed in if you want, and with all the money you'll save over more expensive TVs, I think it's well worth it if you want to go that route. Okay, let's step away from the measurements. We've established that this TV can get extremely bright, but how is it with black levels and contrast? How's the backlight system on this TV? Well, I'm pleased to report it is extremely impressive. When you sit on axis with this TV, that means more or less right in front of it, blooming or halo effect is a non-issue. Depending on your vision, you may see a corona of light around bright objects on a dark background, but you are not likely to see blooming on this TV from the backlight. Even when you sit well off to the side, where you can typically see blooming very easily on even the best TVs, it's super minimal. I'd say that TCL has done an outstanding job breaking the mini LEDs into the right amount of zones to get high brightness and great black levels out of this set. Go ahead and turn on the closed captions. You will not be bothered by this halo of light popping up in the letterbox bars. Watch a lot of content like this, where there's bright, colorful stuff on dark backgrounds. You'll swear this TV is virtually as good as OLED. But it is not as good as OLED in the black level department. See, even though it can make big, dark areas very dark, it doesn't have pixel level dimming. So say you've got a gray tweed jacket where some of the fibers are black and others right next to them are light gray. On an OLED, those black fibers will be jet black sitting right next to the light gray. And that kind of contrast, which gives some real three-dimensional reality to textures, can't quite be pulled off by any LED backlit LCD TV. But wow, does the QM8 ever get close? The contrast on this TV is just out of this world impressive, particularly because it can get so bright. Yeah, but Also because its blacks are remarkably good. There is one little caveat though, and that is that this TV does crush blacks a little bit. That's the trade-off here. We could get a little more shadow detail, sure, but that would end up being at the expense of the inky blacks that we're seeing here. I suspect that for most people, most of the time, the small sacrifice to shadow detail is going to be well worth it. The exception is when you're watching really dark shows like Silo or Ozark or Game of Thrones, for example. They're all created by folks who are in love with the way their content looks. And so they do not shy away from making dark content. That dark content is watchable on this and many other TVs, but it's best watched in a dark room. Do not expect to watch shows like that in Dolby Vision dark picture mode with the lights turned on. Dolby Vision bright picture mode with the lights on is watchable, but really, I suggest watching dark shows in Dolby Vision bright with as little room light as possible for the best experience. Don't blame the TV, blame the content creators. It's their vision, if you will. Color, as I stated earlier, is very good and can be excellent when calibrated. I have no complaints about color on this set, even without a calibration. It's very good when you put the TV in movie mode. Now, motion. Let's talk about that a bit, because that is one of the areas in which this TV doesn't perform quite as well as some others, though I do have to point out that those others, like the Sony X93L for instance, though they may have better motion resolution, also cost like twice as much. The motion issues I detected came exclusively from 24 FPS content. So movies and high quality shows like, well, Silo and Ozark, and any number of streaming TV shows that are shot like movies as opposed to TV. As you can see in this absolute torture test, there's a fair amount of judder going on. You can see it as a sort of blinking in the ropes of the hammock here. Furthermore, if you look at the gravel in the background, like through the hammock ropes, you can see that it gets a bit blurry as the hammock is moving, and then stabilize a bit when the hammock hits either side of its pendulum swing. In real content, it ends up looking like this. Watch the trees in the lower right quadrant of the screen. You see that? That's what it comes up as on this TV. Now, you can get rid of that judder entirely or just tamp down on it a bit using the de-judder option in the motion portion of the TV's menu. But the more you use, the more fake the image is gonna look. See here, the rope in the hammock is clear and not juddering now, but the background is completely flat and this whole picture just looks artificial now. By comparison, the X93L is significantly smoother. Sony's processing is just really, really good. We've said that many times before. So this is one area where you can get better performance from a more expensive TV. But at almost double the price, is that something you're gonna worry about? Now, as for tone mapping, that's how the TV handles the income brightness signal and then adapts it to work with its capabilities, which in many cases, this TV will exceed that of the input signal. Like most content is mastered at 1000 nits, sometimes at 4000 nits, but 1000 is far more common. This TV can get more than twice that bright. And I think the TV does a great job with dynamic tone mapping turned off at maintaining highlight detail in the brightest areas. It doesn't just over brighten stuff and clip it off prematurely. As mentioned, the dark areas can get a little crushed, but at least it isn't raising the black levels. Okay, that's a lot, but let me step away from the deep TV enthusiast picture performance stuff for a moment. And just let me say that I think the QM8 looks fantastic. I've been enjoying watching this TV a ton, and I would 100% put this TV in my own living room. In fact, I probably will. If I don't get shocked by one of the TVs coming down the pike, I will probably make this TV my daily driver at home. I'll explain why in just a moment when I put all of this into perspective, but first, we have to talk about gaming for a minute. Now, as I've said before on this channel, I am not a hardcore gamer. I can look at a TV from a metrics perspective and extrapolate a lot from that. I can also play Forza and PGA Tour and any number of other beautiful games that I enjoy playing but am arguably terrible at. And I have. And they looked and felt great to me on this TV. But unlike my picture quality evaluations, of which I am quite confident, I have not gotten my gaming chops up to a level where I'm comfortable speaking to gaming enthusiasts and saying, my take is gold, so take my word for it. I just won't do that. What I can tell you is that this TV will go up to 144 Hertz, but it cuts the vertical resolution in half to do it. So 1440p at 144 Hertz. I can say that it supports VRR, and I have not seen any horrible screen tearing here. In fact, at higher refresh rates, this TV looks super clean and crisp. I haven't noticed any nasty backlight anomalies when in VRR mode. The picture stays looking great. I can also say that the BFI is flickery, and I won't use it, but I say that about every TV's black frame insertion feature. Beyond that, I'm just not gonna get into the gaming weeds. I'll leave that to the gaming experts, and in the meantime, try to spend more of my scant amount of free time gaming. But y'all, it is wedding season right now, and I am playing a ton of weddings. So look me up in the late fall and we'll see how I'm doing then. So here's where I've landed with the TCL QM8. It is going to be my go-to TV recommendation for probably 90% of people this year. It is just that good, especially for the price. Honestly, it's super hard for me to justify recommending competing TVs when they cost almost twice as much. TCL has closed the performance gap to such a high degree that the price gap is just really hard to justify anymore. I mean, like, yeah, OLED is still king, but a $1,300 65-inch TCL QM8 versus, say, an LG C3 OLED for $2,200? I mean, really makes you think, doesn't it? The number of folks who are gonna value the picture quality differences that an LG C3 or G3 or a Samsung S90C or Sony A80J offer, especially considering the additional cost, well, that number of folks has gone from this big to like this big, I think. That's why the TCL QM8 is such a massive winner for me. It's gonna thrill a massive audience. This TV needs to be on everyone's shortlist, and I do mean everyone. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. What do you think about the TCL QM8 here? Lingering concerns or mostly just excited? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one, and until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like.